Welcome, America. This is Levin TV, a best of 2021 program. One of the things that happened this year was what took place in our school systems. It had been taking place, the indoctrination of our children into this American Marxist ideology and its various subgroups, critical race theory, the degrowth movement dressed up as climate change, and of course a war on capitalism, as well as the transgender movement. Ground zero was Loudoun County, Virginia, which is actually the headquarters for Levin TV. And we were eyewitnesses to all of this, all of us were, during the course of the year. We were involved in this movement in many ways because of the book American Marxism. We helped nationalize this issue of critical race theory. Parents rose up, and I can tell you they're still rising up about what's going on in Loudoun County, and they're trying to recall school board members. But this is very important for our movement. It's very important for going forward and clawing our way back in the culture. And so I hope you'll take a watch and take a good close listen.
This is where freedom rings.
If you believe in America, if you believe in the Constitution empowers us. It's a new day. America's back. America's back, and America's going to get strong again. We're going to defend America, and we're going to defend our interests.
Liberty's voice, Levin TV.
When you're a teacher, you have an obligation. You have an obligation to be honest, to have intellectual integrity, and not to abuse the children and your authority in the classroom to advance your political agenda. I've even heard people say, at least teach both sides. Don't teach any side. Teach American history, teach our founding documents, teach people how to read and write, teach them literature, teach them how to become, motivated, interested, smart young men and women who can make their own decisions. And that's what you want out of a public school system, not teaching any sides. American history is American history, and there's plenty of it to teach, and the vast majority of it is very good. That's all we ask. Well, in California, I want to thank Project Veritas, which is a fantastic organization that could also use your support. They just put out a video of a California high school teacher who admits communist indoctrination of the students, pushing Antifa. This is something that American Marxism deals with and tries to address and encourages people all over the country to get into Chapter 7 and to do something about this. And so we are going to get to the issues in Afghanistan. I'm not leaving that behind for a second, but I also want to address this as these matters come up. So take a look at this. Go.
I have 180 days to turn them into revolutionaries.
He has 180 days to turn students into revolutionaries. This is a teacher, a union member, tenure, protected, in a public school in Sacramento, California. You pay his salary out there, you pay his medical care, you pay his pension. Absolutely unbelievable. And trust me, this guy's not alone. He represents a significant population. Go ahead.
How do you do that? How do you scare the out of them?
The Sacramento organization that is under the banner of Antifa is very loosely organized, right? When there is right-wing rallies and stuff, then we'll create an opposition to that. Yeah.
Beautiful. Where would he go to connect to some of these organizations?
I post a calendar every week,
awesome.
and then and I do it for extra credit, so they get points for doing it. So that encourages them to do it. And I've had students show up for protests, community events, tabling, food distribution, all sorts of things. When they go, they take pictures, they write up a reflection. That's their extra credit. I have an Antifa flag on my wall, and a student complained about that, and he said it made him feel uncomfortable. Well, this is meant to make fascists feel uncomfortable, so if you feel uncomfortable, I don't really know what to tell you. Maybe you shouldn't be aligning with the values that this is antithetical to. So the Cultural Revolution in the 60s was fixing the problem that came about after the economic one. It ultimately failed, right? There was a lot of excesses. People were definitely shot in the streets that probably shouldn't have been.
Incredibly ugly behavior come out of this city, and you can see a couple of people over there that might be demonstrating that.
I have 180 days to turn them into revolutionaries.
How do you do that? How do you scare the out of them?
People were definitely shot in the streets that probably shouldn't have been.
I like what you said in our phone call. You're like, I have 180 days, right?
Yeah.
What was,
I have 180 days to turn them into revolutionaries.
and that's the question.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them are indifferent. I think they're distracted by the gadgets and video games. How do you do that? How do you scare the out of them?
Meet Gabriel Geit. He's a public school teacher paid for by taxpayer dollars at Intercom High School in Sacramento, California. Geit, who teaches advanced placement government classes, is not shy about his involvement in Antifa's local chapter. He even has an Antifa flag and a poster of Mao Zedong in his classroom.
So, it's like my wife and I have been political organizers. I've been organizing since I was 13.
Wow.
And I've been in a ton of different organizations, and I've been on the front lines, and I've taken a step back and gone back and forth, and my wife is the same way.
Is there a local Antifa or chapter?
Yes, yeah. The Sacramento organization that is under the banner of Antifa is very loosely organized.
By the way, it has been my belief, and I've mentioned it here during the riots last summer, that I think public school teachers, I think professors, and I think college students, particularly who were at home because they weren't attending college classes due to the virus, were heavily involved in the riots taking place in the summer, particularly on the Antifa side, but also the Black Lives Matter side. These teachers' unions and the tenured professors are the Marxists, or the Marxist organizations that are pushing their agendas. The information is available. The information's in American Marxism. There's simply no question about this. Go.
We have no official member list, right? So when there is right-wing rallies and stuff, then we'll create an opposition to that. Yeah.
Beautiful.
So and Sacramento, as a city itself is incredibly diverse, but we're surrounded by a bunch of right-wing rednecks. And then the other really big organization in our area that, if you're looking to get involved, is NorCal Resist. NorCal Resist does direct outreach for undocumented folks. They help them with material support as well as legal aid and support with the help of the National Lawyers Guild. So they work in tandem with each other. So that's why I do political efficacy events, because I want to get them out in the community. I want to get them familiar with organizations that are doing work, what type of work they're doing, how they can be involved, where their passion is, and what they can contribute. Because it's every single one of us can do something. I'm not asking you to all be on the front lines, but I am asking you to be involved. And it is so much more than just sharing a tweet or posting on Instagram.
Geit seems eager to get his students actively participating at radical, activist political events. But he takes it one step further by motivating them through extra credit in exchange for their attendance.
So for youth that, so let's say my son is pretty
Yeah.
he just is, that do, he's 17, who want to get plugged in though to actually doing stuff in the community, to activism, where would he go to connect to some of these organizations? People that are interested, are there flyers or something?
No, I post a calendar every week.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So
for the organizations that you mentioned, so they can get connected. That's dope, man.
And then and I do it for extra credit, so they get points for doing it. So that encourages them to do it. Because I can't just hey, here's some things going. They'll never go, right? And I've had students show for protests, community events, tabling, food distribution, all sorts of things. So since I work with PSL, and PSL has connections with a bunch of other organizations, and also Sacramento Peace Action, which is a very old organization that posts a calendar on their website every month of all the events that are going on, and I just put them on my whiteboard, let them know where they are. When they go, they take pictures, they write up a reflection. That's their extra credit.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, the 900,000 of you or so who have a copy of American Marxism, and this was not my intention, if you crack open the book, and if you look at two chapters in particular, Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, what you're hearing, you will also read about in the extensive nature of this propaganda and indoctrination. This is going on in high school, it's going on before high school, but it has sort of reached a plateau in colleges and universities. And these Marxist professors, they don't hide it. They have seminars, they meet yearly or more often than that. They talk about the different techniques for indoctrination, community organizing, violent protest, overwhelming systems, giving extra credit or better grades for those who get involved. They talk about how it's not enough to keep these issues in the classroom, that in fact you need to take them to the streets, get extra credit for going into the streets. And so they are in fact raising, to the extent they can, a generation of individuals as revolutionaries. And I think you saw that last summer, as I said, with the riots and so forth, when the virus was keeping people supposedly at home. This is a big deal, and this needs to be fought. These unions need to be fought. Guys like him need to have their asses fired. They're abusing their authority. You can see where he could have a lot of influence on students in the classroom. Mao Zedong killed tens of millions of people. Tens of millions of people. Antifa is a violent domestic terrorist organization, a Marxist organization, and most of these other organizations too. The National Lawyers Guild is a hugely radical extremist organization. You can find them in most of our law schools today, unfortunately, that get involved in matters like this, in cases to promote this agenda and defend fools like this. I dealt with them when I was in law school, as a matter of fact. So for those of you who have your copies of American Marxism or have the audio, make sure you listen to chapters 2 and 3 or read chapters 2 and 3, and you'll see the nature of this, which is really, really quite horrific. The school system has since put out a mush-mouth statement. It has said they're going to look into this. They don't support, this sort of politics in the classroom, and let's see what actually happens. I'm sure the union will come to his defense, but it's incredible what's going on in our schools, and that's why I continue to insist on cameras, even more specifically, internet cameras in the classroom, so we can all know exactly what's going on. Project Veritas is unbelievable, but it can't be everywhere, and yet this American Marxism is everywhere. How much you want to bet thousands of calls will be made to this hotline, this so-called domestic terrorism hotline, about harassment and intimidation? And then they'll put the data out that the white supremacists and the Trump supporters are behind this. And just like January 6th, we have an insurrection of our school system on our hands. You can see, ladies and gentlemen, that all the tactics that have been promoted by Marxist professors for the last half a century, but particularly in the 60s and 70s, are in play right now. Cloward and Piven overwhelming the system, breaking the system, blaming the system, then controlling the system. You see this happening now when it comes to immigration on the border. That's exactly what's taking place. Overwhelm the Border Patrol, overwhelm ICE, then blame the men and women of the Border Patrol and ICE, accuse them of doing things that look like slavery and so forth and so on, forcing the states to act. But hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people coming in here with God knows what kind of backgrounds and diseases illegally. You can also see the Saul Alinsky tactics right here with Joy Reid and others to target your opponents and personalize the attack, character assassinate them. So now they're doing that with Senator Sinema. The Washington Post has tried that with me, throwing me into a sentence with the Proud Boys. I don't know anything about the Proud Boys, but the goal is clear, to paint me as somebody that I'm not. And the New York Times did it the other day, I believe it was Saturday, in an article they wrote about an attorney, John Eastman, and putting in there that I'm a far-right commentator. With this far-right Proud Boy stuff, I'm a constitutional conservative, of course. And they do this to everybody. Why do you think the Garland memo went out? In addition to him covering for his daughter and his son-in-law, in addition to his ideological agenda here for the unions of the Democrat Party and critical race theory, it is to demonize an entire group of people, parents and taxpayers. That's what it's all about. And so you can see these various movements. Climate change, that is the degrowth movement that's in this massive bill. It's an attack on our energy. It's an attack on your private property rights. You can see it when it comes to critical race theory. Everything's about racism and white supremacy and so forth. This is all not new, but in terms of the press pushing it, it's relatively new over the last 2 years or so. And you can also see it with the other areas that they're pushing spending. You're spending $5.5 trillion and that costs nothing. That's zero. I mean, what are we, completely out of our minds that we have to accept that kind of mathematics from the American Marxists that are taking place? I want to encourage you to inform yourselves about these movements. We're not going anywhere. We're going to push back. That's why we have Levin TV, Life, Liberty, and Levin. That's why we have my radio show, my books, and that's why we have the Blaze TV network. This effort by the Biden administration, the Department of Justice, working with the teachers' unions, the National School Board Association, which is a left-wing organization, and now the Superintendent's Organization, also a left-wing organization, in other words, the educational bureaucracy, working with them to push these totalitarian rules and to threaten parents who raise a ruckus at school board meetings, which they are free to do under the First Amendment of the Constitution. We're not talking about violence. We're talking about raising a ruckus, a peaceful ruckus. That they're going to threaten them. They're going to monitor them with the FBI, with the National Security Division of the Justice Department, the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department. And they're going to have a hotline you call. And this hotline you call goes to a unit within the Department of Justice that monitors domestic terrorism. Domestic terrorism. And so you can see what's being laid out for us here. This is totalitarianism. And we need to resist it. We need to be peaceful, we need to be civil, but we need to have armies of parents and taxpayers attending school board meetings, and yes, raising their concerns. Otherwise, we're going to be turning our children in these classrooms over to this educational bureaucracy backed up by the Democrat Party, and they're going to have free rein on indoctrinating your kids against this country and against each other. And this cannot be tolerated. This must not be tolerated. Why is the Attorney General involved in this at all? Or the FBI or the rest of the Department of Justice? There is no federal basis. There's no federal attachment to this at all. School boards are local. State law enforcement, local law enforcement have the authority if somebody's being truly threatened with violence. But the federal government has no statutory or constitutional role whatsoever in getting involved in this. And it's not just the FBI, it's the National Security Unit or division within the Department of Justice, the criminal division within the Department of Justice, the civil rights division within the Department of Justice. Think about that. State and local law enforcement know full well they have an open line to the FBI, and they also know full well the FBI has no business getting involved in any of this. There's a reason why, since the beginning of the FBI's establishment over 100 years ago, that the FBI has never done this before, ever. And they want to use the Patriot Act, Hate Crimes Act. What is this? It's a precedent that must be stopped now. And I want to encourage you parents and taxpayers out there to attend these school board meetings, not just by the hundreds, but by the thousands if possible. Be civil, be peaceful, but you're allowed to speak out, you're allowed to carry signs, and you're allowed to confront these policies and these issues, and your elected officials. You're free to do that in this country. 7 times Terry McAuliffe confirmed that he thinks parents should have no say in their child's education. I want you to think about that. You have to pay for it all, right? Parent involvement is actually a very good thing. And when I was on a school board 40 years ago, whatever it is now, we always talked about parental involvement, but not here because Terry McAuliffe is bought and paid for by the teachers' unions, the educational establishment, and he's relying very, very heavily on them. Go.
Glenn Youngkin's taking my words out of context.
Well, something you mentioned in Tuesday's debate is you said you don't believe parents should be telling schools what to teach. What did you mean by that?
Well, first of all, parents should be telling schools that they want their teachers to be vaccinated.
Do you think parents should have a say in the curriculum?
You don't want parents coming in every different school jurisdiction.
You alluded to parents staying out of this. We just want to make sure that we're understanding you correctly. What is your stance on that as far as what school agendas have to say for the kids?
First of all, this is determined by the State Board of Education and local school boards. And that's where it should be.
Do you still stand by your position that parents should not tell the schools what they should teach?
You do not want 25 parents
picking books.
McAuliffe's reply:
We have a board of ed and we have local school boards who make the decisions about teaching. I'm not going to let parents come into schools. I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach. I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
I love the music in the background, too. It goes up to crescendo. And he means it. He absolutely means it. He is a disaster. He is a Joe Biden wannabe. I want you to think about that. And Joe Biden's coming into Virginia, into one of the most Democrat areas, Arlington County, Northern Virginia, to campaign for McAuliffe. Because McAuliffe can't stand on his own 2 feet. I mean, if you're bringing in Biden, I mean, good Lord. Now, why independents and Democrats may vote for Youngkin? This is CBS News. Go.
All right, in what could be a referendum on the president's agenda and popularity, Virginians head to the polls next week to elect a new governor. President Biden won that state by 10 points, but Democrat Terry McAuliffe and Republican challenger Glenn Youngkin are locked in a tight race, and independence could be a key factor. So we went to the state to find out what's driving people to the polls.
Kendra Lee is a prime example of why this race is so close.
I cried when Hillary Clinton lost. If someone told me that I would ever be not considering voting for a Democrat, I would have thought like you were crazy.
And yet, the mother of 2 voted for Republican Glenn Youngkin. After a year of virtual learning and now mask mandates in schools, she trusts him more with her kids' education.
What is it about what Youngkin is saying he'll do that appeals to you?
I don't think he would have as much governmental restrictions. I think that he would leave it more in terms of local control.
Alrighty! Woo! Youngkin, a multi-millionaire businessman, has wooed voters.
All right, hold on a second. McAuliffe is a multimillionaire, too. He's been known as a bagman for decades, so let's get that straight. Go ahead.
By making schools a central focus of the race, holding Parents Matter rallies where he hammers McAuliffe over something he said at a debate.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
This movement is being led by parents who are saying, no, I am the one who gets to decide what's best for my children.
Youngkin has tapped into concern over race and gender issues in schools, and he's opposed to mask and vaccine mandates.
So what is it about what's happening in schools and those mandates that you don't like?
I feel like I know what's best for my family better than a politician does.
Independent Robert Clark also voted for President Biden, but calls this decision a toss-up.
So you support President Biden, but you may vote for a Republican.
I may.
If a Republican wins the governor's race, what message will that send?
That there is some tepidness around the president's agenda. There are a lot of concerns about some of the choices he's made.
And there's concern among some Democrats that a loss here would be a preview of what's to come in next year's midterms. McAuliffe is trying to make this a referendum on the former president.
He is a Trump acolyte?
He says Youngkin has a far-right agenda, citing caught-on-tape comments about abortion.
When I'm governor, we can start going on offense. But as a campaign topic, sadly, that in fact won't win my independent votes.
We cannot go back. He is against gay marriage. He is against a woman's right to choose.
Let's slow down. First of all, he's not against gay marriage. He's a moderate Republican. That's what he is. They're trying to paint him into some corner. Number 2, on abortion. The Democrats do this every election cycle. First of all, it is strange to me that women in the suburbs are so committed to abortion. It's just a weird thing. All that said, there's not a governor in any state that can end abortion without the approval of the Supreme Court. That's the nature of how this works. I don't agree with it. It has nothing to do with my analysis of it. It is just the way it works now, unfortunately, even in Texas. So I put a bet out there last week on public radio for the whole world to hear, including the McAuliffe campaign. I said, I will bet you $1 million if Youngkin is elected, he cannot end all abortions, which is what he has said on the trail. Youngkin's going to end all abortions, I said, okay, $1 million. If he's elected, that's not going to happen, because it can't happen because he can't do it. I haven't heard back. Go ahead.
The choice of swing voters like Robert will ultimately decide who wins.
I mean, I would like to imagine that my vote is the deciding one, but it won't be. I'm just going to go out and vote for who I believe in.
And we'll be watching in that bellwether race.
Oh, good. But anyway, The Democrats keep cheating and lying. They're still using those videos, the Kamala Harris videos, in these churches. And the former governor of Virginia, Douglas Wilder, the first black governor of Virginia, and so far the last black governor of Virginia, he does not like McAuliffe, and he attacked Kamala Harris, said, what are you going to do? You're going to get all these churches in trouble now with the Internal Revenue Service when this election's all over? And he's complained that the Democrat Party has done nothing for blacks in the state of Virginia. He says, you know, the university I went to is in collapse. It's deteriorating, and we have a governor now. We had a governor before, all Democrats, and they haven't done a damn thing. Meanwhile, what did Trump do with these historically black colleges and universities? Historically black colleges, they call them HBCUs. What did he do? He ensured a stream of funding for these colleges for years to come, for many years to come. Biden didn't do that. Obama didn't do that. He supported school choice. Obama opposes school choice. So these guys running around with Stacey Abrams and so forth, Obama doesn't have any connection with people in real communities anymore. I mean, even his library is controversial. He's building it there on a park in the middle of the city. The community is heavily Latino. They're objecting. They've brought lawsuits. He doesn't give a damn. He's going to build a big monument to himself. It's just incredible. There's more Democrats, and then added with independents in Virginia, than there are Republicans. That's a fact. But all these parents, they're so stupid. They're coming to these school board meetings on their own time, putting their names and their reputations on the line, challenging what's in the books, what their kids are being taught. And Joe Scarborough, sitting on his fat ass in Jupiter, Florida, is telling everybody, oh, this is a Republican thing. And my understanding is it isn't even being taught in the state of Virginia. He takes no time whatsoever to look. I live in the state of Virginia. It's being taught in the state of Virginia. It's being taught in the state of New Jersey. It's being taught in virtually every state in the union, in virtually every classroom in the union. How hard is it for MSNBC, NBC News to find some investigative reporters to dig this up? If Christopher Rufo can do it on his own, as well as other people like me, why is it so difficult for these multi-billion-dollar corporate media outlets to do it? Why? Because they're liars. That's why. Go.
The big issue. Republicans staying one step ahead of the Democratic Party, and they're still fighting by Marcus of Queensberry rules and getting pushed all over the board.
The Democrats are being pushed all over the board? Poor Joe. That bulbous nose must represent some kind of behavior in the past. I don't know. Go.
Let's start there. Critical race theory not taught in Virginia schools. And
you, clown. In 2015, then Governor McAuliffe's Department of Education instructed Virginia public schools to, quote, embrace critical race theory, unquote, in order to, quote, re-engineer attitudes and belief systems, unquote. They explicitly endorse CRT. He can't wiggle out of this one with word games. Right now on its website, he writes, the Virginia Department of Education recommends, quote, critical race theory in education, unquote, as a best practice, and derives its definitions of racism, and he quotes, white supremacy and education equity explicitly from critical race theory. If you were watching CBS News the other day, you would have been lied to. If you were watching MSNBC this morning, you were lied to. Now, why do they keep lying about this? Why do they keep lying about this? Because they're trying to paint parents as racist, not just Republican Party. Look, all whites aren't Republican. I mean, again, the fact that Youngkin is leading in some of these polls or tied in some of these polls shows you that it's not just Republicans. But that's the narrative. That's the scenario. Wipe that smirk off your face, you jackass. Joe Scarborough. Go ahead.
And the video clip is really funny and can be found on Twitter if you want to go find it. But it does show that Republicans are good. It's dishonest. It's not a good faith argument, but they are talented at branding. They're talented at making an election about certain issues, even if they don't have any basis in reality. And those issues, in this case, critical race theory, propagated over and over and over.
See what a liar they are? How they lie? Propagated over and over and over and over again. No, it's propagated over and over and over again because it's occurring over and over and over again. You had parents showing up at these different school board meetings, and not just in Loudoun County, Virginia, talking about what their children are being taught in the classroom. Now, are we supposed to believe the parents of these children? The children come home, the textbooks come home, the parents were watching, 2 years ago or so? Or are we going to believe these people who are just pushing propaganda? They're the same people who pushed Russia collusion, on and on and on. The same people who pushed that Donald Trump is going to be indicted over Stormy Daniels or some such nonsense. The same people who put Michael Avenatti on time and time and time again. The same people who are relying on Mueller to come up with a report that condemned Trump over Russia. The same people who were the recipients of leaks from the FBI, intelligence agencies, the Department of Justice, the Hillary campaign, and ran with them. The same people who covered up the Hunter Biden scandal before the election. The same people who covered up the name of the phony whistleblower that they used in the Ukraine case. And I could go on and on and on. This is what they do. These are them. And I just showed you, and there'll be parents galore that would tell you, yes, they're being taught critical race theory. But the Democrats and the media, one and the same, can't make up their minds. Well, are they being taught critical race theory? On the one hand, they say no. On the other hand, they say, so what? Don't you want to teach about slavery? Critical race theory isn't teaching about slavery. American history teaches about slavery. It's pushing Marxism. Go.
It's interesting talking about these issues that Republicans are using so effectively in Virginia. I saw a clip last night of a guy being interviewed on the news, and he said that critical race theory was his top issue. And he said, what is it? Oh, I don't know what it is, but it's my...
Oh, wait a minute. We have a candidate running for governor in Virginia, Terry McAuliffe, who couldn't explain what critical race theory is. Remember that? One of the actual local journalists, a real journalist, and she kept pressing him. You keep saying it's a dog whistle, it's divisive. Can you tell us what critical race theory is? I don't have to. It's divisive. It's a dog whistle. She kept pressing him and pressing him and pressing him. And you don't remember Chowderhead here at the Morning Schmo mocking McAuliffe, do you? No. Go ahead.
Do you know anything about... No, I don't know anything, but it's a top issue. And it just reminds me of what the Republicans did the year before with defund the police. We had Nancy Pelosi on. We had just about every Democratic leader on, and they all said the same thing. No, we're not for defunding.
Wait a minute. How many mayors did you have on, you jerk? Minneapolis, as I speak, is having a vote today on whether to eliminate their police force and replace with some public safety office to eliminate their police force. The murder rate's going through the roof. They've been slashing the budgets of the cops. Remember New York City? DeCamio took $1 billion away, $1 billion away from the NYPD. Remember he eliminated the 600-man unit of undercover detectives who were out there doing proactive police work? I could go on and on and on. Is this some kind of a joke? I mean, they've effectively defunded the Border Patrol, haven't they? By tying their hands, they've effectively defunded ICE. Not technically, but effectively told them you're not allowed to round up people and deport them. Or on the border, you're not allowed to stop people and deport them either. You're not even allowed to ask them about their vaccines, if they've had any. You're not allowed to test them. It goes on and on and on. I don't know what this clown's smirking about. This is the disconnect. This is the disconnect. The media are in the upper middle. Actually, no, the lower upper class. You're looking at two people. I guarantee you Scarborough makes millions of dollars a year, as does his wife, what's-her-face. They make millions of dollars a year. This guy on the right, as goofy as he is, I'll bet he makes $500,000 a year. None of them make what the average people make out there. There's a complete disconnect between the media in this country and what goes on in this country. For instance, these people, you can see behind Scarborough, there's the Capitol building and the Supreme Court. Well, it just so happens the Capitol building and the Supreme Court aren't next to each other. They're across a park from each other. He's doing a show from Jupiter, Florida. I have no problem with Jupiter, Florida. I have a home in Jupiter, Florida. When I'm in Florida doing my show, Mr. Producer, don't I say I'm in Florida doing my show? He wants you to think, oh, he's just a hardworking journalist there. Look at the other goofball. Same thing. Same thing. They have no connection with what goes on in this world. None. Go ahead.
Let's reform the police, but let's support the police.
Wait a minute. The Democrats have said let's reform the police, but let's support the police? Is that what they said 2 summers ago? What a complete liar this guy is. A complete Fraud. Go ahead.
Have all of these people coming on TV and saying, oh, the people aren't going to be suckered by that, or something. But they were. They were. I mean, that was a huge issue in 2020. Now Republicans have moved on to critical race theory, from what I understand, something that's not even taught in Virginia schools. But that's
not even taught in Virginia schools. A moron and a liar. With respect to these elections, it's not just Virginia, and look at New Jersey. It's all over the country, in Pennsylvania, in Texas, and other parts. School boards, local mayors' races. It's unbelievable the wave that has taken place. Governor-elect Glenn Youngkin. This guy is a fantastic candidate. Fantastic. He's got energy. He's got likability. He's very earnest, and that gives him his charisma. Like the guy next door, right? That's what he seems like. And when he went up against McAuliffe is a dirty, low-down career politician who will do anything to try and destroy him. But it didn't work because enough Democrats and independents moved over to Youngkin, and enough Republicans supported him. And I looked at some of the numbers. White women in the suburbs moved heavily to Youngkin because of his education issues and so forth. And we'll get into some of this because the media have lied about critical race theory. They say it doesn't exist, that it's not being taught in Virginia schools. They're attacking this man as if he's a racist with dog whistles and so forth. And you'll see he's like the nicest guy you can ever see running for public office his first time. So let's just take a few minutes of his speech to remind us of who he actually is rather than the narrative from the media. Go.
My fellow Virginians, we stand here this morning at this defining moment, a defining moment that, yes, started with two people on a walk, and a defining moment that is now millions of Virginians walking together. Walking together, sharing dreams and hopes, just like the ones that have always been planted on my own heart. Dreams and hopes for a Virginia that soars, a Virginia that never settles, a Virginia where the Virginia promise comes alive for everyone that calls this Virginia home. Together, we will change the trajectory of this Commonwealth. And friends, we are going to start that transformation on day one. There is no time to waste. Our kids can't wait. We work in real people time, not government time. And so on day one, we're going to work. We're going to restore excellence in our schools. We will invest the largest education budget in the history of the Commonwealth. We're going to invest in teachers, new facilities, special education. We're going to introduce choice within our public school system. How about that? Choice within the public school system. We're going to start with 20 charter schools, and we are going to make a down payment and close the gap on giving parents an opportunity to select where their kids go to school. Friends, we're going to embrace our parents, not ignore them. We're going to press forward with a curriculum that includes listening to parents' input, a curriculum that allows our children to run as fast as they can, teaching them how to think, enabling their dreams to soar. Friends, we are going to reestablish excellence in our schools.
I think he'll be an outstanding governor. Now, the Democrats control the Senate in Virginia, I think by 1. The House, what they call the Assembly, the delegates, up for grabs, though. I think it's tied or close to tied. In my own district, unfortunately, in part of Loudoun County here, the candidate, the Republican, lost by a couple hundred votes. And that is that represents a number of these races throughout the state of Virginia. Virginia is a Democrat state now. It's blue, and yet he won. He was able to hold down the big vote in the northern suburbs, and by that I mean the differential was tighter than typical, and massive voter turnout in the rural areas, massive. And as I say, the suburbs, he did quite well in the suburbs. Now, people are saying this is a template on how to run. He ran on education, cutting taxes, safety and security, and transparency. Those are things that we support across the board. The difference here is he wasn't afraid to take on critical race theory, which is, as you know, a pernicious racist ideology that is spreading throughout our school systems. And he jumped on top of it. I hear people saying it started with Afghanistan and this, and I don't think Afghanistan had anything to do with it. I think it has everything to do with Biden and so forth. I also think there is some truth in the fact that people had had enough of Biden and the Democrats and what they were doing and wanted to send them a signal. But this really did come down to, in many respects, the rejection of critical race theory and the goal to impose that on parents and students throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. The teachers' unions jumped in, the Department of Justice and the Biden administration jumped in, and Terry McAuliffe was all for it. But the American people don't want their kids taught racism. They don't want their kids hating one another. They don't want their kids brainwashed. They want their kids to get a quality education. I never thought I'd see the day where the Democrats would actually campaign against quality education. Now they'll say they're not, but of course they are. When you're using the classrooms to push your propaganda. And again, this has a lot to do with you, the millions of you who listen to this program, my radio show, my Fox show, who read American Marxism. Engage, activism, people who are typically not comfortable with it. You did. And not just in Virginia, all across the country, you've made an enormous difference with school boards and mayor races and local city councils, upset after upset after upset, one part of the country to the other. Now, if you're a moderate Democrat, so-called, like Manchin and Sinema, like I said on radio last week, you could see where Manchin was taking a much firmer stand against the Biden profligate spending bill. He saw the polls. Now he'll see the votes. West Virginia is much more conservative than Virginia. It's much more conservative than many of our states. If Manchin goes along with Pelosi and Schumer, with San Francisco Nancy and New York Schumer, he will destroy his career, what's left of it. And so will all the other so-called moderates who won by 2%, 1%, less than 1%, 3 or 4%. Their political necks will be on the line, and they will lose. How much do you guys want to bet that I'm on some kind of watch list now? How many of you want to bet? The New York Times calls me far right. A few months ago, the New York Times tried to tie me in with the Proud Boys. I don't know anything about the Proud Boys. They got a letter from my lawyer. It's the Washington Post. They're kind of the same. And warn them that if they do it again, they're going to get a libel suit. But this is how they try to demean you and destroy you. I'm not going anywhere. My voice is not going to be silenced. But how much do you want to bet because I wrote the book American Marxism In Chapter 7, I talk about things that we can do, including attending board meetings, including attending ways to go after the union through the tax code, Freedom of Information Act requests, and so forth and so forth. I mean, I don't know it for sure, but I got to believe these guys have a hair trigger now. And so this is a red line for all of us who believe in liberty and all of us who believe that parents and taxpayers should have the primary say on what goes on in our classrooms. Because make no mistake about it, these are Democrat board members working with the teachers' unions, pulling in the Biden FBI and the Biden Department of Justice and the Biden-appointed U.S. attorneys to get involved to intimidate parents and others who seek to protest what's going on in their classrooms that they pay for with the employees whose salaries they pay and whose benefits they pay, and the school board members who are responsible to them. This is an effort, a bald-faced effort at intimidating parents and taxpayers. And let me tell you something else. This is a further propaganda effort to smear everybody with this January 6th insurrection stuff. So in the Department of Justice, where there are radical, hardcore leftists and Marxists that have been appointed to all the top positions there, Criminal Division, Civil Rights Division, the Deputy Attorney General, the Associate Attorney General, and the Attorney General, who was a fraud, never a moderate. This is an effort for them to use the resources of the federal government to shut down opposition to critical race theory and genderism. This is an effort to paint everybody as a white supremacist or a Trump supporter and so forth and so on. That is what's going on here. That's why they've used January 6th. That's why January 6th is so important to them, where they keep calling it an insurrection when in fact it was not. Even the FBI had to issue something late on a Friday afternoon about a month ago saying they don't have any evidence that there was a planned insurrection. Of course, because a planned insurrection with unarmed people breaking in and roaming around the Capitol building, that's not an insurrection. I'm not saying it's proper, but it's certainly not an insurrection. And the reaction to that, the way that the Department of Justice and the FBI have treated many of these people who weren't even in the building, is appalling, particularly when you consider it in light of what happened with Black Lives Matter and Antifa. But now they're targeting parents. Now they're targeting taxpayers. If this regime were around during the rise of the Tea Party in 2010, they would have done the same thing to the Tea Party. They're not going after Black Lives Matter, which is an avowedly Marxist organization that seeks to overthrow the United States government. The parents and the taxpayers in these board meetings are not seeking to overthrow any government. They're seeking to control what's going on in their classrooms because the government is rogue. It's out of control. It's pushing racism. It's destroying the nuclear family. It's pushing lies about American history. And parents are involved now. And Mr. Garland and his Department of Justice don't like it.